Hey, it's Andy Lockwood. Good morning. College Coffee Talk. Just fiddling around with my old camera here because I'm not only the star, the talent, as it were, but I'm also the producer. Good morning. College Coffee Talk is all about answering your college questions. I try to do a question each day. Sometimes I squeeze in an extra question. And today, my question that I'm going to be answering from it's not just one parent who's asking me this. I get this question constantly. Is it, especially this time of year, when seniors are evaluating their financial aid offers and their acceptances and all of that? So my advice is, if that's you, or if you have someone who's a junior or sophomore and that's going to be you in a year or two, I would advise you to brew yourself a cup of Joe or whatever beverage, herbal tea or whatever that you prefer, and take a little listen because this is definitely, I can tell you that this answer is going to be a lot different than what you might hear from a guidance counselor or another parent or something like that. So here's the way I look at it. The question of whether it's worth paying up for an elite college, whether it's an Ivy or a quote-unquote easier, lesser school versus the local state school or other cheaper options, is not that easily answered. But I want to drop a few facts on you. So the first one I want to call your attention to is that there was a study done, I think initially in the 80s, I want to say, and then it was updated at least once or twice by an economist, I guess two economists. One was at Princeton, the other I'm not sure where she was from, Kruger and Dale, Kreuger and Dale, if you want to look it up yourself. And they tracked a couple of different data points. So initially the study looked at two sets of kids, each of which, I'm not sure, had gotten into an Ivy League college. Now, Group A went and Group B did not go. Instead, they opted for the cheaper college. After 10 years, their earnings were nearly identical, or statistically they were identical. So that was the first study. Very interesting. Think about the implications. I'll get to those in a minute. The follow-up study I thought was even more clever and more interesting. They tracked, again, two sets of kids who were similar on paper, similar grades, similar SAT scores, and so forth. One set gets in to the Ivy League college. The other set does not get in. So they end up going to a quote-unquote regular school. Well, guess what happens? After 10 years, earnings are substantially the same. So the implication there from that study to me indicates that it's not necessarily important where you go to college, it's more important that you go. And I think that the kids who strive for Ivy League schools or have great grades and scores see themselves as being competitive in that area. So that maybe that attitude or maybe that work ethic or something that's kind of around those ideas, maybe that's much more important than actually where you go to school. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to call to your attention. There's another study, and I'm embarrassed. Well, I'm not really embarrassed. I'm sort of shameless, but I don't remember who did it. I believe it was written up in the New York either the Times or the Wall Street Journal about a year ago by another economist, and they indicated that this study seemed to indicate that for certain majors, such as the STEM majors, science, technology, engineering, and math, there is really no correlation between where you go, whether it's a prestigious college or a regular quote-unquote state school. However, the study also pointed out that if you were going to major in something else, the example I always give is business, then it could matter because of the network and the connections and all that type of stuff that you get from alumni. And I have a couple of clients who are in the recruiting field, and they're usually quick to point out that their firm has certain schools that they do select from, and if they get a resume from a school that is not in that list, it's not going to go to the top. So that is certainly a major consideration for certain fields. So in that case, when I have a client who is trying to get into a Wharton versus a state school here in New York, I can, not that I ever want to spend a client's money, but I can see the justification for paying up to go to a Wharton. Likewise, I can't see the justification if someone's going into teaching or a field where it doesn't really seem to matter about the alumni network, that type of thing. So there's some schools that have great alumni networks that I could justify paying up a little bit. Penn State happens to be one of them. They have not only an outstanding career center, but I believe they have the most living alumni out of any college. Michigan, another school which is very expensive to go to, but the network there, if you're in the New York area or a lot of other metropolitan areas, you see Michigan grads everywhere. So those are a couple other thoughts on that. The questions that I get a lot are, well, should I go to, I got into a state school. Should I go to the state school, which is going to be about $25,000, $26,000 a year, or should I go to a Fairfield or a Loyola, or schools that are very strong private colleges, but are going to end up costing out of pocket at least $15,000 to $20,000 per year more? So in other words, is it worth another $80,000 to go to a school that is, quite frankly, not Harvard or Duke or Vanderbilt or any of those types of schools? That's a very hard question to answer. Personally, I don't know if it's because I'm just wired this way or I'm cheap or I'm always looking for value. I couldn't do it. I could not justify it myself. But there's a lot of intangibles that you have to sort of factor yourself. You have to govern yourself accordingly. All right, last point here. This is a biggie. That's why I had to take that extra sip of caffeine. The last point is that all of these studies, any study, any rank, any type of empirical, scientific, or quasi-scientific, statistical, whatever study, they all neglect one huge thing, which is what kids put in to college. So you can go to a Harvard, Yale, Princeton, or whatever, but if you just sit on your butt and you don't ever network or go to the career centers or take advantage of the alumni network after you graduate and all that, it's not going to help you too much. And in contrast, a kid who goes to here in New York, like a Baruch or any of the CUNYs, but who works his butt off or her butt off and does stuff like internships and is very aggressive in marketing, stepping out of the comfort zone and marketing themselves and all that type of stuff. That's someone who's kind of got the grit and the street smarts and the hustle and the drive to succeed despite the quote-unquote, doing a lot of that today, despite the quote-unquote obstacle of not going to a top-choice college, a prestigious college. So that's the last thing, and I think that the hustle and the drive and the willingness to step out of their comfort zone, I think it's got to be at least 50%, if not 75% or more of the equation. Look, 20% of Harvard grads are unemployed. I think it's 20 or 25% actually are unemployed over any rolling 20-year period. I remember when I was so I grew up in Newton, Mass, right outside of Boston, and we had a 5-year high school reunion for some reason. And I remember at that reunion, we counted up 7 kids had gone to Harvard from our high school. I went to a public high school, about 500, 600 kids in the class. Sending 7 kids to Harvard apparently was not that unusual, mostly because Harvard really looks at legacy a lot, and there's a lot of Harvard grads in the area as well as professors at Harvard and all the other schools. So where I was, Newton was literally right across the Charles River from Harvard. Anyway, 2 out of those 7 were unemployed. And I remember one of them was really not doing too well at all. We thought that he might be suicidal. And I thought that was kind of odd, whereas, ironically, at least to me at the time, the guy who seemed to be doing the best, meaning that he had a great career, already bought a house, had nice cars, hot wife, all that. I'm not even sure he went to college. He went into a construction-related field. So we see that type of thing all the time. Just because you get into the prestigious school doesn't mean that the rest of your life is smooth sailing. And I think that's another sort of implied fallacy that a lot of kids and parents get tunnel vision about. If my kid can only get into such and such, then that's where they deserve to go and whatever. I don't know if that's it. I believe in intermediate goals. I'm big on goals in general, but understand that's not a final goal. That's an intermediate goal, and the real thing, I think the real desirable goal is to be successful, the rest of your life. Which is why I tell kids who are gunning, and look, this year we had kids that we worked with one-on-one. I worked with one-on-one, who got into Harvard and Yale and MIT and so Vassar, Cornell, whatever, so forth. And what I always tell them is, listen, even if you don't get in, the fact that you're already a really smart kid and you work your butt off and et cetera, that means that you are going to be successful no matter where you go. You could go to a community college, you could not go to college. Those character traits, again, that's what's going to make you successful. So it may be ironic for a college guy to say this, and like I said, you'll probably never hear a guidance counselor say this, but that to me is much more important. Of course, you want to go to a college that's going to set you up for the highest chances of success, no matter what. But that's really what it's all about. So I'm not so sure it really pays. If you're looking at spending an extra $5,000 a year, $10,000 a year, I can sort of justify that in most cases. But I think you need to be very economical in your basis for making a decision where to go to college, and I mean that in a broad sense, the pros and the cons. Okay, that I kind of rambled a little bit there, but you can tell, I guess, that I'm very passionate about this type of subject. Doesn't get talked about too much. If you want some more information, we're running a local workshop in Garden City next week, I believe the 29th. I will post a link to that here on this page. And it is College Planning Secrets, how to get in and pay wholesale prices for the top colleges in the US of A. That is at collegeplanningguru.com. That wraps up this episode of College Coffee Talk. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great weekend. And I will be here either at the house, my home office here, or traveling around to the South Shore. And if you need me, just drop a comment right here. Please like, comment, and share. And I'm happy to try to help you with any of your college planning questions. Thanks for watching.